and making sure my friends were safe because they started to have pregnancy scares and they started to be worried. And I was like, okay, then we get enter AOL dial-up, and my dad shows me that you can Google things and search things. So I started to search. I started to try to figure out answers for them. And that's kind of how sex educator Ericka was birthed because I refused to give head in the woods. I instead, I instead wanted to nerd out on why the hell everybody wanted to do this.
Welcome to Stars and Stars with Issa. This is the show where we look to the stars above with the stars below. I'm Issa Nakazawa, your host and resident astrologer. And today I'm super excited because we have Ericka Hart on the show. Activist, writer, sex educator, and author of the upcoming book, Nasty Work. Ericka is a Sagittarius sun, Scorpio moon, and Aquarius rising, which means she's wired for big truth, deep feeling, and radical honesty. In this episode, Ericka shares how she became a sex educator by refusing to accept what didn't make sense, how her work challenges colonial and capitalist ideas about the body, and what it's cost her to tell the truth in spaces that prefer comfort over change. We talk all about pleasure, politics, tenderness, resistance, and what it means to live in a body that the world keeps trying to define for you. So without further ado, let's get into the episode. Ericka, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited for this conversation.
Me too. You look gorgeous.
Thank you.
Before we dive into the beautiful details of your chart, I'm just curious if you can tell me a little bit about your relationship to astrology, if you have one.
Oh, yeah, I definitely have a pretty big relationship to astrology. I open my classes with asking all my students what their sign is. I looked at my kid's chart pretty much immediately after he was born. Ebony and I my partner, use a lot of astrology to understand our dynamic as a Gemini Sagittarius duo. We use it a lot. I use it. We look to Susan Miller and Channy Nicholas. Channy Nicholas is a friend of ours. Yeah, that, really lets us know what's going on. I don't necessarily know like all my planets and all my houses. I know like the main three, but beyond that, I don't know too much. But I feel like this year, 2026, I intend to understand a little bit deeper. Yes, yes.
So we're going to start by sharing, like you said, your big three, your sun, moon, and rising with our listeners. So you are a Sagittarius sun. It is still your season. So happy birthday season.
Thank you.
Yes. And you are a Scorpio moon, the sign before Sag. And then finally, you're an Aquarius rising.
Yes.
So beautiful chart. And yeah, you are kind of in this like interesting quadrant of astrology where Capricorn is also going to be discussed a little bit today because Daddy Saturn is among us in your chart. So we will be talking a lot about Saturn. And we're going to start right there with your rising sign because it's the most personal sign of your chart. Channy always calls it your big yes. I think it's really poetic when you think of ascending in the form that you currently inhabit in this world. And I want you to think of your rising sign as that doorway to your purpose. In modern astrology, it's often collapsed as the mask, which is not, completely untrue because it gives us a sense of how we engage in life. And so it gives us a sense of, that first impression. I think there's some truth to that. But I want you to think of it really deeply as your yes, your why. And when I think of Aquarius risings, I think that doorway that they're coming through the world is radical, it's disruptive, it's deeply committed to telling the truth, which is a big theme in your chart. And I was thinking of our Aquarius ancestor, Audre Lorde, a lot as where I want to start, because one of my favorite Audre quotes is, well, there's so many. And I know this one's used a lot, but I think as like poets and educators, this one really speaks to me, which is, if I didn't define myself for myself, I would be crunched into other people's fantasies for me and eaten alive. And I think about this a lot with Aquarius risings and this archetype of the outsider who refuses exile by naming the truth. And this early awareness that something about the Saturnian, the Capricornian kind of social contract is off. And so Aquarius risings are here to kind of nudge us towards something else, which I think is why so many Aquarius risings are like science fiction, speculative fiction writers, or people who can imagine and kind of nudge us towards something else. So I actually want to start with baby Ericka and kind of your early context. And I want to know, when you were young, did you already feel this kind of Aquarian awareness of not an outsiderness necessarily, but being positioned as someone who is going to be visionary, who is going to see what is and see what could be?
First and foremost, everything you just said was really beautiful, and that Audre Lorde quote is actually quoted in my book. So that's serendipitous, if you will.
The new book.
The new book,
Nasty?
yes, my new
Okay.
Nasty Work, yeah, my book that's coming out in April. And I love this question about me as a kid. And yes, I have always felt like an outsider. And I felt like a lot of that feeling of outsiderness was stuff that was happening to me. Like people were positioning me in that way. I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood. So I was kind of picked and prodded at often. But then I also just felt, even within my Black family, I felt different as well. And not necessarily the same story of like, grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood and I don't feel Black enough for my family. Not necessarily that. I just felt weird. Like I just felt like I
Aquarius.
was a weird person. And it's so funny because my kid is an Aquarius, and I'm like, they, yes, I'm like, you are so me, but then not at the same time. Like the way that they just imagine and like make up things and are not convinced about anything. We just took pictures with Santa yesterday, and all the Santas that he's ever seen are Black. And we were like, time to take a picture with Santa. And he's like, the Santa was white. And he's like, that's not Santa.
That's so Aquarius, son. They're like, I know what I know, and I'm not going to be swayed.
Right. What do you mean? You're tricking me. Santa where? So I have always been it's very similar, like very inquisitive, very skeptical, but also gullible at the same time. Like,
Sag, yeah.
yes, very woo woo. I had, it's so funny because in my brain, it's so much bigger, but it's actually not that big. It's like an acre and a half. My backyard was like trees, and it just felt like it went on for years. And I would just get lost. I would pick berries, and like I lived in the suburbs of Maryland. Like I didn't live necessarily in the sticks, but kinda. But both of my parents grew up in Baltimore City. So they always looked at me like, this girl is so strange. I remember when Bath and Body Works, I think, first came to be. I think it was the first time the store opened. We went there, me and my mom, and they have the little baskets to like put things in there. And I was like, oh my God, can I have these to pick berries? And my mom was like, I'm sorry, my kid is from the sticks.
You're like pre-cottage core, like, I'm getting the berries for the pie.
And this is exactly what I need. I need this basket.
Okay, so that's baby Ericka. And then Ericka, kind of in that era of life, the middle and high school, like, can you remember a time where, in the spirit of Audre Lorde, there was a moment of like, hold on, I need to take agency, the agency that I do have, and define myself because of the crunched into other people's fantasies and eaten alive? Like, when was that kind of awareness? And do you have like a story or a moment where you were like, I need to start self-defining because the stakes couldn't be higher? It is life or death for me.
I mean, still to this day, in middle school, high school, what young people are doing is they're exploring their bodies. And they're exploring their bodies by themselves and also with other people. And we didn't have the internet to get bored with. A lot of my friends were engaging in oral sex, having sex. And I just was like, I'm not doing that. Like, I refuse. What I said, middle school Ericka literally said verbatim, is I'm not putting my mouth on something pee comes out of.
Oh, that's real. Who can disagree with that?
So instead of hooking up in the woods like everybody else was doing, I became the sex educator and making sure my friends were safe, because they started to have pregnancy scares and they started to be worried. And I was like, okay, then we enter AOL dial-up, and my dad shows me that you can Google things and search things. So I started to search. I started to try to figure out answers for them. And that's kind of how sex educator Ericka was birthed, because I refused to give head in the woods. I instead wanted to nerd out on why the hell everybody wanted to do this.
I have so many thoughts going through my head too, because I do think of the planet ruler Saturn. So in the traditional system, which is what I use, Saturn is also the planet rule of Aquarius. And then in the traditional system, there was only 7 planets that were visible to the human eye. And then through the invention of the telescope, we got Uranus, which is the co-ruler in the modern system of Aquarius, Neptune, and Pluto. But Saturn is also the one that takes responsibility. And I was thinking of Saturn-ruled people often really young take on responsibility. So I was thinking of that caretaking instinct even at a young age of I want to, like you just said, one of your motivations was like, I want to keep people safe. And that feels very Saturnian, which you have a lot of in your chart. And that's your leader, you know, that's your chart leader of like, I want to make sure that I can like, yeah, keep the people I love safe. And then how do you do that? Your Sag sun, which is the educator, and then sex, Scorpio, your Scorpio moon being like, I see that this thing is happening and I don't shame it, but I want everyone to do it safe. And I want to think a little bit about this new book, Nasty Work, which we're all so excited for. And it does just feel, when I was reading the description, I was like, my cheeks were lighting up because I was smiling because it just felt so Aquarian. And this impulse that you have, that's such a through line in everything you do around subverting norms and dismantling oppressive myths. Mm-hmm. And I feel like, obviously, when we think of Aquarius, that's what Aquarius is interested in, subversion, you know, taking things apart. It's a systems analyst like Virgo. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of your work is also, let's look at the assumptions underneath culture that are not underneath it, that are also vibrating through it. Yep. And let's not take them for granted. Let's look at that. And so I'm curious if you can tell me a little bit about this book and like and kind of putting your Aquarian lens to it. Like, how do you feel like that kind of maps onto your Aquarius like lens of looking and shaking out the norms? And what norms are you shaking out in this new book?
Yes, I mean, I needed this reading before I wrote it, but absolutely, it just makes a lot of sense at how I came to it. As I have been a sex educator for the past 15 years or so, and what I have always noticed in the sex education space is that it is very white, it is very cishet, and even when it's queer or when it's poly, it's still void of any or kinky. It's still void of any conversation of racism, of homophobia, of transphobia. It becomes like this footnote or just a conversation that will happen on the sidelines if something happens, right? It's not actually talked about as literally the foundation of how we understand our bodies. So the Aquarian is like, we must have a conversation about systems of oppression in an effort to talk about sex, in an effort to talk about sexual freedom. That's the reason why I wrote Nasty Work, was to honor the people who have non-consensually contributed their bodies to the field of sex ed, and also to say firmly that if we're going to talk about sex, we have to talk about systems of oppression as well.
Oh, that's really powerful.
Thank you.
I think sometimes it's hard when your work is like, no, the personal is the political is personal.
Yep.
And I've seen this for years with you. You artfully are like, I'm just being sexy. Like, I'm not necessarily trying to be out here. Oh, it's not like a big political statement all the time, because anything I do is politicized.
Yes.
And this is like another thing about your chart that hopefully I don't lose you that was so powerful and eye-opening, is that you have your moon, which, you know, often in astrology is just thought of as like your emotional body. But I want you to also think of it as your physical body, right? So it's both, right? And of course, that makes sense to us who do somatic work. Like, we feel our emotions through embodiment. And that's very much in our birth chart. And then Mercury, the placement of what we're doing right now, exchanging ideas, processing the world, both of them are in Scorpio. And they're both forming a harmonious sextile to your ascendant, because your ascendant is at 0 degrees. So it's like almost Capricorn. Basically, when you have planets that are making any kind of like aspect to your ascendant, they become pretty visible to us, the outside world who sees you. So suddenly these planets that in another configuration could be more hidden, they become like pretty like front and center in how you energize the world and in your purpose, and they become more visible. And I thought, this is Ericka, like your Scorpio, which is your transformation, your regenerative energy, but also everything you just said in the last like 6 to 10 minutes of like, we're not going to sit here and talk about the things that make us feel reassured and convenient. We're going to talk about the truth. That's Scorpio. Scorpio and Sag, both are interested in the truth, but Sagittarius does it in a very fire sign, wild horse way that's like philosophical, adventurous, and Scorpio is subterranean. We go into the underworld, we go into the depths, and we show people what they think they're too afraid to handle. And we show them that they can. And not only can they, that we all need to in order to transform to our full power and potential.
Yes.
But what's interesting about you is that a lot of the like things, the body transformations, the way that you're communicating is energizing the public. So things that are really personal, like a double mastectomy scar, suddenly becomes everyone else's business. Whether or not you wanted it to or intended it to, suddenly a deeply personal scorpionic transformation starts to catalyze other people's transformation. So I'm curious, like, how has that felt, even if you can take like one example of like this moment where you were just in your own body, doing your own thing, and then suddenly there's kind of this like public reckoning, because that's in your chart. That is like a very loud signature in your chart. And I'm like, what does that feel like?
I've been thinking, like, I just want to be more insular. I don't want to share anymore. I feel like I've shared enough. You've seen
You
so
have.
much
You've shared
of
a
it.
lot.
I've shared a lot. I'm like, what would it be like to just share more of my journal and not so much the world? But it's funny that you're like, well, this is actually you. This is how you are designed, is to share.
Yes.
And I think, going topless at that music festival that shall not be named, it just felt like bliss. Everybody kind of melted away. There was nobody else around. I'm not, obviously, Sagittarius, I am not afraid to be naked at no point. It felt like the stars were aligning. I felt free. I just felt whole. I just felt like I feel so much better in my body. I feel so much better. And not because I had a double mastectomy, because I'm done with chemotherapy, which was literally felt awful to be on. So, and I just was happy to like close out that chapter. So that was a moment, first of all, that I also didn't realize would go viral. So I wasn't anything where I was like, oh, I'm going to go here and people take pictures of me. I literally was going for me and to make a difference, right? I was like, I want to make a difference. I want people to know what this looks like. I don't want any queer and trans people not to check their chests because we're queer and trans and we're not marketed to in terms of cancer. We're not advocated towards in terms of cancer. So that was my main purpose. And from there, it just was, I got so much more out of it.
And now I want to move into your beautiful Sag sun,
Oh, dear.
because we're moving from Aquarius to Sag. And, one of the cool things about the zodiac is that it is a narrative, and we believe as astrologers that the signs have a corrective function to the previous signs. And so Sag follows Scorpio. And so, like we said, Scorpio and Sag, because they sit next to each other in the zodiac, they do share this quest for truth. But sometimes Scorpio, and I can say this because I'm all Scorpio, like and you have a lot of it too, we like to go deep. We're a fixed sign, we get obsessive, we kind of figure out what we're going to investigate and probe, and we go all in. And then Sag, here comes Sag, ruled by Jupiter, the planet of philosophy and expansion and the higher mind. And it says, what if the way that we look for truth is also in the world, is also from this to this? Like, what if we widen? What if we go out and live the questions? What if we explore? What if we take risks? What if we actually didn't think about the Scorpio worst case scenario and we thought about the other best case scenario? And what if we rehearsed that, right? So you have this dynamic of both in your chart. And I want to start there and ask, like, where does this kind of living big it live in you? And if you can think of like even an early Sagittarian impulse in your life where you took a major risk and you said, let's live it. Let's just not know and jump. And can you explain that moment? Like, what was that moment in your life where you were like, I'm actually going to just trust and like go for it?
I joined the Peace Corps after college.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I worked on a cruise ship. I didn't know what I was going to do. I knew I wanted to be a sex educator, but there's no clear path of being a sex educator. The Peace Corps application takes a year of processing. So I had applied I had applied a year before and I had gotten accepted, but then I had that like 4 months of time before I was leaving and I needed a job. So I went on the cruise ship, did the cruise ship thing, then came back, and then I left to the Peace Corps. And I had always wanted to live on the continent of Africa, or at least visit. And I was at a time in my life where I was like, I am not African American, right? Like I'm indigenous African. That's who I am. And I was very clear about that. I'm like, I'm not American at all. And when I applied to the Peace Corps, they give you a map and they say, where would you like to live in the world? And I just literally filled up the continent. Like you have like 5 choices. And
This is so Sagittarius. I'm like,
every part of Africa was lit up. Like that's all I wanted to do. I didn't want to do anything else. So I went, and probably the biggest thing that I realized is that I am actually very American.
oh my God, James Baldwin right here. He's like, yes.
Yes.
My Aries moon and your Sag sun, I love for us because no one is okay with cringe more than Aries and Sag. Leo doesn't even like cringe like the way Sag and Aries were like, whatever.
I love cringe.
Dive in. But Scorpio and Aquarius don't like it that much.
No.
Aquarius more, but our Scorpio, and you have a Scorpio moon.
Yeah.
Like our Scorpio moon, you know, we can be so hard on ourselves. And I love that fire sign part of us throws us off the edge.
Yeah.
And that helps us a lot kind of like get bigger. And also Sages are so funny.
Yeah.
Like
we're out of control.
And this is a question I have a little bit because you have taught in a lot of different spaces. You've been a sex educator and an author for a long time, but a lot of the spaces have also been academic in nature. You've taught sex education that are also environments that, you know, have been historically rooted in white heteronormative ableist frameworks. And I'm kind of curious about that push and pull when you've been in those spaces, like how you manage that tension around doing like decolonial work around sex, pleasure, and embodiment inside spaces that actually can feel really profoundly repressive to those of us inside of them. Like, what is that tension and how do you kind of navigate that?
Well, I've gotten fired from most of those places.
Yeah. Columbia, right?
Columbia, yeah. Columbia, I got fired from. Maybe there's something in my chart about it being a mystery to me about things that are very obvious. But I was always talking about Palestine, always acknowledging, indigenous stolen land in all of my classes, including Columbia. I taught all over. And then at Columbia, I was doing that for 4 years. And then I had a disgruntled student in my class that essentially found a way to get me fired. And I would say that across the board, even when I worked at big time corporate queer nonprofits, also not fired, but I would need to leave. Like the tension is too much because, like you said, I want to actually make a difference. I don't want to do hogwash. I don't want to give people lip service. I know what my community is dealing with because I'm also dealing with it. So I don't want to have this job at this massive institution and be waxing poetic about systems of oppression and it not actually change the material conditions of the people who I love, including myself, right? Like, it's like, what's the point of us sitting around talking about this all day? So when I was at Columbia, I was in the School of Social Work and I just refused to release social workers out into the world if they were going to be transphobic or homophobic or sex negative. I taught homosexuality and also gender there. So you weren't going to pass my class if you were unwilling to let go of your oppressive beliefs. And a lot of academic institutions, nonprofits, the same, believe that your opinion is everybody gets to have it and it's just your opinion. No, some people's opinions are violent and they don't actually get to have those opinions, right? And a lot of those opinions are not rooted in any sort of sustained study or practice. They're just from their grandpa that they heard once, right? Like, and who cares about that? Like,
what a source.
Right. And their grandpa's likely dead or like somewhere not doing anything. So who like, it's really hard for me to be in those spaces, which is why I now have my own course that I teach completely separate from academic institutions called Sex Ed as Resistance, because I was over being policed by academic institutions. I still teach in some, but for the most part, I'm just trying to create my own, hopefully freedom school where people can attend for free. And I also can, take care of my family and teach.
But we do need checks to stay alive. But I'm convinced that not putting pressure on us, but I feel like, there's certain people who have that gift to be like, we have other options.
Yeah.
You have the chart of someone that's like an architect. Like Saturnian people are like architects. It's like
Mm.
architects of imagination.
Oh, that's
People who
beautiful.
can,
Thank you.
people who can bridge and inhabit fantasy, right? So thinking about those skill sets of like the dream that can actually become through collective, right? That's the 11th house, through kind of this like collective calling in of our community, like we can create these institutions, we can create these big dreams.
If there's a project that you want to do that you have been sitting on, that you have been second guessing, just launch it. As an entrepreneur, the past 3 years, I don't know what the stars are saying, but the past 3 years have been rough financially. And it has a lot to do with the systems that we are living under. And I have had to do a lot of work, a lot of intellectualizing, a lot of therapy to uncouple my worthiness with how much money was in my bank account, or the fact that I didn't have a gig. With all the canceling of DEI, that is a major way that I make money.
Was there a moment where you realized like, this is really where you kind of had to face how much of your identity was wrapped up in what you do and what you earn?
Yeah, it's a lot of therapy. I was exhausted from it. Like, that was a big conversation that I was having with myself and only with myself. A very heady, the Scorpio, like going into the abyss of my feelings of thinking like, I'm not good at this. I'm horrible. This is not making a difference. I don't know why. Maybe I should go back and get a full-time job, and you blaming myself for Columbia and so many things. Like, the mind is very, very powerful. So lots of therapy, but also just having to talk it out loud, the processing, being honest about this is where I'm at, has, with my friends, with family, with, trusted community, that has made the biggest difference for sure.
Yeah, let's talk about that because your Scorpio moon, Scorpio, I talk about the Scorpio moon a lot because the moon exalts in Taurus, and that's Scorpio's opposite sign. So we call Scorpio moons in fall or in detriment, meaning that the moon, which it exalts in these signs like Cancer and Taurus that are really like receptive and kind of have an ease of accessing the tenderness of life. Scorpio is a sign that oftentimes we hide our softness, not because we don't feel it. We're equally, if not more tender than both of those signs. But sometimes we've learned, early in life, maybe there was some messaging that we had to be the strong one, that we had to be the one to figure it out and to go through a hard thing. And that maybe that was just expected of us. And so we didn't even have the awareness that softness could be something that we openly discuss as a need.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really beautiful advice to other Scorpio moons, where like sometimes just sharing who you feel safe with, the parts of you that do have needs, that needs to like feel soft and held and worthy in moments, especially when things aren't going our way, that can be the most vulnerable. And it's interesting too, because our moon, which is where your Scorpio falls, is like our bloodlines and our epigenetic memory.
Yeah.
It's like where the shape of our memory.
Mm.
I mean, I know your mom also had a Cancer journey, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my mom is deceased.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that too. Like that kind of example for listeners is like how there is kind of this like passing inheritance of a memory that is also very like embodied too. And I was wondering about that relationship with your mom. And you've spoken to me in ways that I thought were really interesting about actually and this could have changed because I've read this from years ago and things change, but you said really fitting, interesting things about it. Wasn't just about like Cancer, but also your mom as a Black femme and things that like people were assuming were her experience just through her Cancer experience. And you were like, no, there was a lot of caretaking that wasn't reciprocated.
Mm-hmm.
And that was also an experience that you observed in your mom. So I'm kind of curious about that echo in you and like what you observed about your mother's experience.
Yeah, my mom was a caretaker for everyone. She was the only girl sibling, and in a very misogynistic family, and that played a big role on her, to the point where I can share this here, that when she had I think it was a lumpectomy at the time, my grandmother and my grandfather actually went to Atlantic City to gamble on that day and did not go to the hospital. I was very young at this time, so I didn't understand these dynamics at the time. But now, as I'm older and I hear these stories, and I also, as the oldest sibling, not the only femme, but the oldest, the eldest daughter, I have absolutely done that. Like, really positioned myself as the person that's going to caretake for everybody else, to the point where when I needed support, people showed up for me, right? Like, my family was there, but there were a lot of people who did not. And people that I went out of my way to support in so many ways. I just learned that my mom was this yes all the time to everyone around her, to the point where she needed something, they were nowhere to be found. So that definitely lives in me, and a generational curse that I am actively working to break.
Thank you for sharing that. And I was curious. I was like, wow. And now you actually have a child.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So one of the things about Scorpio moon that I thought was like, okay, it's the sex in the sex educator. We can all
Yes.
say that. And again, it's shining in this house of public roles, the 10th house that's associated with Capricorn. So it's our public callings. It's how it connects us to society. But I was also thinking of just asking you questions about your own erotic and like your own sexiness. Because I feel like, come on, like Scorpio, like I feel like Scorpios are often misunderstood. We are considered the sex symbol, and I think that's often really misplaced. And Scorpios can be the ones that have the most like longest bout of celibacy because we're a controlled sign.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to control the access. We need to control the conditions and the terms of engagement. But I do think we are the sign of the erotic. Like, I think we are the shepherds of intimacy. We're the ones that can eye gaze. We're the ones that can create a space where we're really trying to merge souls and we're not just trying to be bought flesh bags. Like, we really believe that sex is something that can be a really sacred ritual. And we're also not afraid to talk about sex in the truthful way of it being awkward and messy and weird.
Yeah.
And like, we're not afraid to go there. It's not a freaking rom-com.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I want you to tell me a little bit about your erotic these days. Like, how do you describe your erotic? How do you feel into it? Like, do you have practices or experiences that make you feel really alive in your body?
Masturbation has always consistently been a practice where I feel very alive in my body. Like, solo sex is great. And that's something that I highly recommend for everybody, especially people who are partnered. Because I think a lot of times folks that are partnered, especially in long-term relationships, you adopt this very comp het belief that regardless if you're queer or not, that your body belongs to this person, or that's where you're supposed to get your pleasure from. And it's so far from the truth. We really need to be seeking pleasure for ourselves on our own terms in ways that honor our commitment, obviously. But self-pleasure I've always been a big fan. And I also like, what feels really good to me right now, because sometimes I'm just too tired to fuck, is a really good shower. Like a shower routine. Ooh, a dry brush, multiple body wash, and then a scrub and a oil rub down, and then lotion on top to seal it all in. Get into like half PJs. What I mean by that is like just the bottom, because I'm too hot for the top too. So, and then lay in the bed and clean sheets. Erotic.
Okay, I'm getting turned on right now.
Erotic. Like, that is amazing. Where I get to doom scroll, even though lately my latest hyperfixation has been journaling talk. Like, I get to go look at all the journals that I need and the different pens.
Hell yeah.
Sex.
We're talking the same language.
Sex.
For people, that's so funny. For people who don't really have the same relationship to self-pleasure, or like don't even know where to start, I want to ask that question. Like, what is a good way for someone who maybe is an adult and hasn't really explored self-pleasure? Like, how can they start?
I would say a good way to start is to start in the mirror. Looking at yourself in the mirror, even if you're not touching yourself, is really, really helpful in getting comfortable in your body, so you can move into maybe doing something more sensual. The skin is the largest organ, right? So rubbing your skin, rubbing your thighs, rubbing your inner thighs, like slowly, maybe as you put lotion on, really taking your time to care for your body, and maybe exploring a new crevice. And if you move to genitals, you move to genitals. If not, not. And I would say, if you need some encouragement, I don't shame porn. I think there's a lot of great queer porn that's accessible, that is not super expensive, but is not obviously the porn hubs, but I think porn is also a really great way to, get started. Even watching porn, like Crash Pad has porn of people masturbating. And I think that that's also helpful too, to watch, to like find different ways to masturbate, find different tips and tricks, things that, may feel good for your body, but maybe not. But you get to explore that and find out what works.
Yeah, there's so much more to explore, but I would love also to just end on you shouting out your new book and
Yeah.
any other. Yeah, I mean, you're doing cohorts. I know there's one that's already full, but maybe just tell us how we
Yeah.
can stay connected.
Yes, so my book is out. You can pre-order it now. It will be out in the world April 7th. That's the pub date. I'm very excited. It's called Nasty Work. And what else? I'll be on a tour this spring and summer, so hopefully I'll come into a city near you. And I teach sex ed as resistance. We train budding sex educators or folks who just want to expand their knowledge under the sex and sexuality sun, which is literally everybody. Everybody needs a grounding in this work. So lawyers, doctors, healthcare providers, obviously birth workers, social workers, loud and clear, social workers need this work. Childcare providers, parents. I have so many parents that come to me that want to have this information for their kids. But we go through a 8-week module and really break down a lot of different concepts. And at the root of it is talking about systems. So less how do you give the best blowjob and more this is the reason why there's not a lot of black sperm in fertility banks, right? Like this, more talking about systems and which will make you have a better sex life, in my opinion, right? This will all improve your sex life. If you're clear about why you want to do certain things, I feel like that, makes it better. So the winter cohort is full. But I'll probably be releasing a spring at the top of January. Check that out at www.ihartericka.com.
Wordplay. Let's get it. All right, Ericka. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure.
You.
We're thank you for gracing our show, and we will be following everything you do.
Of course. This was wonderful. Thank you, Issa.
That was Ericka, who is a Sagittarius sun. As always, to end the show, I want to leave you with some key takeaways we can all benefit from, inspired by our stars chart. So today we talked about how Aquarius rising is deeply attuned to systems. It can't unsee the structure underneath the story. And you hear that very clearly in the way Ericka frames sex education. Not as a hyper-individual, just communicate better wellness sermon, but as liberation work that has to name the real conditions shaping our bodies, from racism, colonialism, homophobia, transphobia, racial capitalism, and beyond. In her words, if we're going to talk about sex, we have to talk about oppression, because it's not a footnote, it's the very foundation. And this conversation gave us a real lived example of the cost of that Aquarian clarity. Ericka shared, for example, that she's felt pushed out of institutions for refusing to keep things polite. But what makes Ericka Ericka is the Scorpio moon underneath it all. Scorpio moon has fierce reverence for the truth over platitudes. It's not interested in performative progress. It wants the thing that's real, even if it costs you something. Even when Ericka talked about going topless after her double mastectomy, it wasn't for spectacle. It was Scorpio moon purpose. I want queer and trans people to check their chest. I want people to know what this looks like. I want to keep my community safe. That's intimacy as responsibility. So here's today's takeaway. If you're someone who wants to help, heal, teach, or advocate, try not to let self-improvement culture make you forget the world you're improving yourself inside of. Aquarius rising asks, what system is shaping this? Who benefits and who pays? Scorpio moon asks, what's the truth underneath the comfort story? And am I brave enough to name it? So this week, I want you to ask yourself, where have I been tempted to make a complex reality sound simple just to be palatable? And what would it look like to tell the truth with more integrity, even if it costs me a little approval? Because sometimes the most healing thing you can do isn't to offer a prettier narrative. It's to name what's real and refuse to abandon yourself while you do it. And that's it for our download from the cosmos this week. If you like today's episode, please, please, please leave a comment to keep the conversation going. Hit that subscribe button. And remember, we're live on YouTube every Wednesday answering your cosmic questions. I'll see y'all next week.